The wind howled across the empty stretch of Highway 46, bending the tall grass along the shoulders and sweeping dust into the air. The sky hung heavy with the weight of an approaching storm, dark, bruised clouds that rolled low and slow, swallowing the horizon. Somewhere along that desolate road, a silver Toyota Camry limped to a stop, its engine coughing like a sick old dog before dying completely. Inside, Maggie Carter, a 32-year-old nurse from Fresno, let out a long, shaky breath. She turned the key again. Click, click, nothing. The dashboard lights flickered weakly and then went out altogether. "Come on, not now," she muttered, hitting the steering wheel. Her phone sat uselessly on the passenger seat, showing 2% battery and no signal. She was alone, at least 15 miles from the nearest town, with nothing but open farmland and storm clouds for company. Maggie had been driving home from a double shift at Mercy General. Her uniform still smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. The past few days had been brutal. Too many patients, not enough staff, and a flu wave sweeping through town. She'd been running on adrenaline and caffeine for almost 48 hours. She rubbed her eyes and looked out at the endless stretch of road. Her gas gauge read empty, though she was sure she'd filled up that morning. A quick check under the hood confirmed her suspicion. The alternator belt had snapped. "Perfect," she sighed, the sarcasm bitter in her voice. Rain began to fall, slow, heavy drops that slapped the windshield and turned the dirt into mud. The wind picked up, rattling the car. Maggie pulled her jacket tighter and debated her options. Stay in the car and wait, or start walking toward the faint glow of lights she thought she saw far off in the distance. She chose to walk. The road stretched endlessly, cutting through wheat fields and orchards. Her shoes squelched in the mud with every step. The rain grew heavier, drenching her hair and soaking through her scrubs. She could barely see ahead, the storm curtain blurring everything into gray. After about 20 minutes, she saw the faint outline of a truck pulled over on the shoulder, an old, rusted Ford pickup, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. Cautiously, she approached. "Hello?" she called out over the wind. "Is anyone there?" A man's voice answered, rough but calm. "Yeah, over here." From behind the truck, a tall man in a worn denim jacket stepped out. He looked to be in his late 40s, with weathered skin and a short beard peppered with gray. His boots were caked with mud, and his hat dripped with rain. "You okay, miss?" he asked, raising his voice against the storm. "My car broke down about a mile back," she shouted back. "No signal, and I think the alternator's gone. I've been walking since it died," he nodded, his eyes scanning her soaked clothes. "You picked a hell of a day for a stroll." "Yeah, tell me about it," she said with a weak laugh. He smiled faintly. "Name's Ray Dalton. Got a little workshop a few miles down that road. Hop in. I'll take a look at your car." Maggie hesitated for a second. Every rule she'd ever been taught about strangers flashed through her mind. But the storm was worsening, and she didn't see another option. Something about Ray's calm, steady voice put her at ease. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." They climbed into the old truck. The heater hummed softly, filling the cab with warmth. The air smelled faintly of oil, tobacco, and old leather, oddly comforting. Ray pulled back onto the road, windshield wipers squeaking rhythmically as they fought the rain. "So," he said after a moment, "you a nurse?" Maggie blinked in surprise. "Yeah, how'd you know?" He chuckled. "Scrubs kinda give it away." "Oh, right." She smiled for the first time in hours. Ray nodded. "My wife was a nurse, back before she passed." "I'm sorry," Maggie said softly. He shrugged gently, eyes fixed on the road. "It's been a few years. Cancer. She loved her job, though. Always said nurses are the ones who hold the world together while everyone else is falling apart." Maggie felt a lump rise in her throat. "She sounds like a good woman." "She was," he said quietly. They found her car sitting lonely by the roadside, rainwater pooling around its tires. Ray pulled over, grabbed a flashlight and a small toolbox from behind his seat, and got to work. "Looks like your alternator belt snapped clean," he muttered, shining the light. "Lucky for you, I've got a spare in my shop. Old habit. Keep extras for my own trucks. You sure you don't mind helping?" Maggie asked. He looked up with a grin. "Ma'am, if I left you out here in this storm, My wife would come down from heaven just to slap me upside the head. Maggie laughed, the sound cutting through the thunder. Well, can't have that. Exactly. He pulled out a tarp to shield the engine and worked in the rain with practiced hands. The storm beat down, but Ray moved with calm precision, his breath fogging in the cold air. Within an hour, the car was humming again. You're good to go, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Ray, I can't thank you enough. He waved her off. Just glad I came by when I did. She reached into her wallet. At least let me pay you. He stopped her with a shake of his head. No charge. Just promise me one thing. What's that? Next time you see someone stranded out here, you stop too. Maggie smiled, touched by the simplicity of his kindness. Deal. By the time they got back to his workshop to dry off, the rain had eased into a drizzle. The place was small but tidy, a mix of tools, old engine parts, and the faint smell of coffee and sawdust. Ray poured 2 mugs of black coffee from a dented thermos and handed her one. Here, warms the soul, he said. Maggie took it gratefully. You do this often? Helping random strangers? He shrugged. Sometimes. You live long enough. You realize everyone needs a hand now and then. Doesn't cost much to be decent, she nodded, sipping the coffee. It was strong and bitter, the kind that burned your throat, but somehow felt perfect. They talked for nearly an hour, about his late wife, about her exhausting shifts at the hospital, about how small towns had a way of feeling both comforting and suffocating at once. When the storm finally cleared, Maggie stood to leave. Thank you again, she said. Really. You probably saved me from spending the night in that car. Ray tipped his hat. Just doing what I hoped someone would do for my own daughter. She hesitated. You have a daughter? He nodded slowly. Had. She was 22 when she died. Car accident. About 5 miles from here. Maggie's heart sank. Ray, I'm so sorry. He smiled sadly. It was a long time ago. But nights like this, they remind me how fragile everything is. One small act can change the way a night ends. Sometimes that's all it takes. Maggie didn't know what to say. She just nodded, the weight of his words settling deep inside her. 2 months passed. Winter arrived early that year, frosting the edges of the San Joaquin Valley and painting the mornings with pale mist. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, long hospital shifts, coffee breaks, and exhaustion that clung like a shadow. But Ray Dalton's kindness never left Maggie's mind. She told the story to her co-workers, her sister, even her patients. It became one of those tales she carried, proof that good people still existed. Then, one night in January, fate decided to circle back. It was past midnight when Maggie's unit received an emergency call. Single vehicle accident on Highway 46. The paramedics were bringing the victim in. Male. Late 40s. Severe injuries. Possible internal bleeding. Maggie prepped the trauma bay, her hands moving out of habit. But when the gurney rolled in, her heart stopped. It was Ray. His face was pale beneath the blood and bruises, his shirt torn, his breathing shallow. Truck hit a guardrail, one of the EMTs said quickly. We pulled him out just in time. The fuel tank was leaking. Maggie froze for half a second, then snapped into motion. Let's get him on oxygen. I need IV access, stat. Her voice was calm but shaking underneath. As the team worked, Ray's eyes fluttered open. For a brief second, he recognized her. Maggie? He rasped. I'm here, Ray. You're gonna be okay. He managed a weak smile. Guess you kept your promise, huh? Tears stung her eyes. Yeah, looks like I did. The hours that followed were long and heavy. The surgeons fought to control the bleeding. Maggie stayed close, assisting where she could, refusing to leave his side even after her shift ended. By dawn, he was stable, battered and bruised, but alive. When he finally regained full consciousness later that morning, Maggie was there, sitting beside his bed with a cup of coffee. Welcome back, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Didn't think I'd see you again this soon. Neither did I, she replied, trying not to cry. You saved me once. Guess it was my turn. Over the next few weeks, Maggie visited him often. He'd fractured 3 ribs and suffered a mild concussion, but his spirit never wavered. The nurses adored him. He joked with them, fixed a few broken wheelchairs in the hallway, and told stories about his wife and daughter that left everyone misty-eyed. One afternoon, as Maggie checked his vitals, Ray looked out the window and said quietly, "You know, I think kindness is the only thing that leaves a mark that doesn't fade." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" He nodded. "Sure do. People remember pain, sure. But they carry kindness, it sticks. Keeps the world from going completely dark." When Ray was finally discharged, the hospital felt a little emptier. But he left something behind, a quiet, contagious spirit of compassion. The staff started a small board in the break room labeled the Ray Rule. Each week, they'd share stories of little kindnesses, a nurse buying coffee for a janitor, a patient sending thank you cards, a stranger paying for someone's lunch. Maggie kept Ray's old coffee thermos on her desk, and every few weeks, she'd drive out to his workshop just to talk. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, watching the sunset over the fields, the air filled with the smell of oil and wild grass. Sometimes they'd laugh about nothing. Other times they'd talk about loss and how strange it was that broken people could still mend others. Years later, when Ray passed peacefully in his sleep, the town of Mendota held a small memorial. Dozens showed up, neighbors, old friends, even people who'd once been stranded on that long stretch of Highway 46. Maggie spoke last. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were bright. "Ray Dalton taught me something I'll never forget," she said. "He showed me that kindness doesn't ask for thanks or payback. It just moves, from one heart to another, from one storm to the next, until it changes something. Even if it's small." The crowd was silent, save for the rustle of the wind through the wheat. She smiled softly. "He once told me that kindness keeps the world from going dark. And I believe him." That night, Maggie drove home alone under a wide California sky. The highway stretched before her, endless and familiar. At mile 46, she slowed down, glancing to the side where her car had broken down all those years ago. She stopped for a moment, rolled down her window, and let the cool air brush her face. Then, in the distance, she saw a pair of headlights. A small car pulled over. A woman standing beside it waving desperately. Maggie smiled, turned on her hazard lights and pulled over. "Need a hand?" she called out, stepping into the night. And somewhere, she liked to think, Ray was smiling too.